If every act of preservation is an act of creation, then I guess preserving that church created one conflicted reverend. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2017 drama, First Reformed. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. First Reformed stars Ethan Hawke, Amanda Seyfried, and Cedric the Entertainer, and was directed by Schrader. It tells the story of Reverend Toller, played by Ethan Hawke, who's the spiritual proprietor of the First Reformed Church. His interactions with others, as well as his own personal demons, lead to a series of cascading events surrounding this church. At its core, First Reformed is a film about uncertainty. Uncertainty about faith, uncertainty about one's health, and uncertainty about the future of life on the planet. This uncertainty is both a hindrance to and a driving force for the characters in the film. It prevents some of the characters from moving forward, while pushing other characters to behavioral and psychological extremes. Even the 4:3 aspect ratio creates a sense of uncertainty regarding who or what is just out of frame. Although the idea of uncertainty is the primary theme of the film, how that uncertainty manifests itself in the characters is central to the story. I'm not a big fan of the journal framing device, but I do think it was effective at the very least. Since this is primarily a character study of Reverend Toller, his journaling and narration provided cryptic yet important insight into his thought processes and mental state throughout the story. The increasing dichotomy between the events we witness and the descriptions Toller leaves behind in his journal only further emphasizes his internal strife. It's not often that you come across a film that deals so heavily with both religion and climate change. The connection between the two was a little surprising to me at first, but it actually thematically made sense once I thought about it. Both are inextricably connected to uncertainty, and both were perfect outward manifestations of Toller's internal uncertainty. I really didn't appreciate the demonization of environmental activism, no pun intended, but at least it contributed to some character development here. Despite its lofty intentions, First Reformed left me unmoved and unsatisfied. The ending was a big disappointment for me. Even though I understand the symbolism and implications of the final few minutes, it felt extremely self-indulgent and unnecessary. Even prior to the ending, there are so many things sprinkled throughout this plodding, slow burn that are either downright strange or outright heavy-handed. The California Adventure soarin' ride of absurdity is a perfect example of the former. As far as the latter, a pregnant woman named Mary? Really? I don't know. This is one of those movies that I'm not surprised got so much praise, but I don't really understand the basis for that praise. Oh right, it's an A24 film. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one was the cinematography. It didn't stand out as exceptionally amazing or anything, but the film was still very well shot. I don't quite agree with the decision to go with the 4:3 aspect ratio, but visually speaking, the film was interesting. The second pro was the mixture of themes. I was pleasantly surprised by the prominent inclusion of environmental themes and environmental activism. I just wish films didn't always paint environmental activists as dangerous nutjob villains with entirely one-track minds. My next pro kinda spans the gap between pro and con. This movie leaves a lot of things open to interpretation. The movie is more of a character study than a straightforward narrative-driven story, so that openness actually works here. What pulls it across the aisle to the con side is the heavy-handedness of the setup. It forces the biblical metaphors front and center, which directs the audience towards a likely interpretation rather than just allowing them to truly come to their own conclusions. On the con side, my biggest issue is the inclusion of what I'm simply gonna call weird stuff. This film takes a number of unexpected turns, which actually made it effective as a bit of a mystery at first, but then it takes a huge leap, both stylistically and plot-wise, that just feels entirely out of place and abruptly disconnected from the rest of the film. The magical mystery tour sequence starts this, and the film never really recovers after that. That ties in nicely with the second con. The pacing. It was obvious from the start that this was going to be a slow film, but that's initially okay since the characters are interesting and the plot's mysterious. But once that illusion of mystery is substituted for dull weirdness, the slow pace becomes painfully obvious. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying First Reformed or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm going to give First Reformed 2.5 out of 5 paws. It looks good and starts off decently, albeit slowly, but quickly succumbs to A24's typical dull, weird twist that causes the rest of the film to veer off track. I would recommend First Reformed to people who like A24's more character-centric films. These are the movies that are usually drenched in banality and come across a bit boring, but then get kind of weird and leave you with something to think about and potentially discuss with other cinephiles. If you liked First Reformed, I would recommend you check out Silence for another slower-paced film focusing on a spiritual leader's internal conflict. Like I just mentioned, some other A24 movies might be up your alley too, so I would recommend The Lighthouse. In terms of plot, it's quite different, but it's another bizarre tale that's presented in an atypical aspect ratio. If the internal struggles of Toller were something you found interesting, I would also suggest you watch Taxi Driver. It too features a pretty conflicted main character and was actually also written by Paul Schrader, just like this movie. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen First Reformed? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite Ethan Hawke movie? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insider information on this review, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies. The way life should be.